Okay, I'd like to introduce Dr. Alan Cron to give us a opening remarks.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Good morning and welcome back to what promises to be a truly unforgettable school year. I have a few people to thank. First, I'd like to thank the senior leadership team, our principals, Dr. John Harrison, Beth Bond, Jan Sheehan, Michelle Shifley, Marilyn Smith, our Director of Special Education, Dr. Linda Maniglia, Assistant Superintendent Colleen Forlizzi, and our Business Manager, Jane Hackett, and my assistant, Donna Lamb, for working tirelessly since March 13th to get us where we are today. With the support of Joan Walsh, Dinah Capeless, Ira Kohler, and Liz Norse in my office, we have held it together and made sure that the bills, including your paychecks, were paid. None of these individuals had a summer vacation, and I appreciate their hard work and dedication to our students and to you. I'd also like to thank Mark Sham and the custodians and maintenance staff for preparing our buildings for our return. Their jobs have taken on an increased importance during this pandemic, and they have responded by taking this virus seriously and by working hard to ensure that the policies and practices outlined in our return to school plan are implemented. I'd also like to thank Tim Wells, our Director of Technology, who has worked throughout the summer and who has oversaw the distribution of more than 500 Chromebooks in the spring for students who were in need, and who is now overseeing the distribution of nearly 2,400 Chromebooks district-wide. And thank you to Adele Leonard and our outstanding cafeteria workers who served lunches and breakfasts throughout the summer to our families. This program was truly a highlight in the midst of much uncertainty. I would also like to acknowledge the work of our school committee, Chairperson Joe Maroney, Vice Chair Emily Davidson, Secretary Thomas Mills, members Jamie Hennessy and Daniel Biggins, and to a former school committee member, Dick Phelps, who stepped down in July from the school committee after more than 20 years of service. This committee has been available to me night and day as we work to develop a plan for our safe return to school. Another group who did not have a summer vacation is your union leadership, REA President Sharon McGonigal, Vice President Kathy Paulding, and head negotiator Fred Damon. They too have been meeting with us regularly throughout the summer. They were at the table on the first day when we began to craft our reopening plan, and they were there on the day we finished. You have been well represented throughout this process. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone who has been furloughed since March. It is a difficult experience to be furloughed, no matter how carefully it is handled on our end, and you have been exceptionally professional and patient. Please remember, furloughs save jobs. We've saved nearly $1.6 million through furloughs and would not be opening with the staff we currently have if it weren't for these difficult financial decisions. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the Rockland Education Foundation. They are led by President Regina Quirk. Board members include Kimberly Phelps Nelson, Jack McGrath, Janet Can, Mike Ross, Jim Bailey, Carol McGrath, A. Scott McKinley, Richard Phelps, and Dylan Bernache. These ladies and gentlemen solicit donations from the community, then administer a grant program to distribute funds to Rockland classroom teachers. Their grant application is now available on their website for any of you who wish to apply. Grant applications for this year are due by September 21st, 2020. As we prepare for the most challenging year of our careers, I'd like to ask you to keep two things in the forefront of your minds. I understand that right now, most of you are probably struggling to pay attention. Your minds are bustling with the things you need to do before we welcome students back. You are anxious to rewrite your curriculum, to learn and sharpen new skills in the area of remote teaching and learning, and you may even be nervous about managing all of the new COVID-related safety protocols. These things are all important, but there are two things that I'd like everyone in the organization to accept as our priorities for the first 2 months of school. And while teachers are definitely the leaders of this mission, no matter what your role, simply knowing these are our two priorities, you too can pitch in. Our first priority, assess our students. We must learn where they are now. We must carefully assess their academic levels, and we must do this before you completely rewrite your curriculum. What skills do we need to reteach? What skills do my students usually have at the start of the school year that they have not been exposed to because of the long spring layoff? Like that first visit to the doctor's office after a long absence, we must check all the levels before we can finalize our plan for getting our kids back up to speed. And assessing also means checking on how our students are doing emotionally. Are there mental health issues that need to be addressed before academic progress can be made? Connect with parents. Set a goal of speaking with each of your families by phone by the end of September. They will appreciate you reaching out before there is a problem to be solved. I promise this will be an excellent investment of time. The second thing I'm asking for everyone to prioritize is to support our SPED, 504, and English language learner students. Yes, we have specialized teachers of special education, and yes, we have teachers of English language learners. But what I'm asking goes beyond who is directly responsible for teaching them. Instead, I'm asking that every teacher, regardless of your discipline, take an active role in supporting our special education students and faculty, and our English language learners, students, and their teachers. Take special care this year when you review each of your students' IEPs and 504s. Know your students' WIDA level and what that means to you as a classroom teacher. So there are the two priorities I'm asking for the first 2 months: assessment and supporting our special education 504 and ELL students. Please take the time to carefully assess each student and find a way to be active in the work of our special education teachers and ELL teachers. Finally, we play a pivotal role in helping kids interpret the world in which they live. How do we address what's going on in the world today with our students? Peaceful and violent protests and a hotly contested presidential campaign. How do we explain the violence? As educators, how do we handle ourselves if students bring up difficult, often divisive topics? What will you do? I hope you will do your best to remain objective and impartial. Teach kids how to have civil debates and conversations by modeling these behaviors in the classroom and throughout the school. What about as a district? What can we do? We can engage, and we will engage, in a reflective process as a district. We are forming a diversity committee that will include parents, students, teachers, school committee members, and administration. We will examine issues of equity, access, and inclusivity in the Rockland Public Schools. We will question everything: our curriculum, our policies, our procedures, and we will seek out ways to do better. We are engaging the consulting services of DEEP, a group that helps organizations examine issues of equity. We are beginning this work with the senior leadership team, and we will continue it with teachers and eventually students and families. The Rockland Public Schools are committed to creating a welcoming, inclusive environment for all students. What about politics? What's expected of you in this arena? Personally and professionally, I don't want to know your politics, and I don't want our kids to know your politics. I want them to understand the difficulty of unearthing the truth through so much noise. Help them do that. Teach them how to ask good questions. Don't give them the answers. Think of it this way. If you succeed at what I am asking you to do, and I were to ask one of your students later on in the year who you are voting for in November, they would say, I really don't know. If that's their answer, then you've succeeded. I am asking for professional boundaries. We are in a position to influence the future generation. Please do it thoughtfully and carefully. This may be your greatest challenge as an educator today. In closing, let's have a terrific year. Let's make lemonade out of lemons. Let's do what we do best in Rockland, that is what's best for kids. Let's keep them in the forefront of our minds at all times, especially when things get tough. That's what sustained me over the past few months. Seeing the kids during lunch pickup or seeing them on the athletic fields this summer, they are why we are all here. They are our mission. Thank you for the privilege of serving as your superintendent, and best of luck with this school year.
Thank you, Dr. Cron. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just as Dr. Cron mentioned, this is all new to us. This is all new to the staff. And as I fumble through this opening orientation, this is what will happen as we move forward, and we will all make it through. So we'd like to introduce our new staff and to let you know that we do have a sense of humor and we will all get through this. So Dr. John Harrison, would you please introduce your new staff?
Hi, everybody. I'm sharing the room right now with Beth Bond because she's having technology difficulties. She didn't follow the instructions to log in properly. So here I am bailing her out once again. I want to welcome our new staff. At the high school, we have 3. Adam Donnarumma for math, high school math teacher. We have Ryan Pratt, English teacher, Ryan Pratt. Greg Salgado, Spanish teacher. We welcome all 3 to the Rockland High School campus. And here's Beth Bond for the middle school staff.
Morning, Rockland Public Schools. Rogers Middle School is proud to announce that we have hired Brendan Foley, Rockland grad, grade 6 English, Jess Carpini, grade 7 math, Julia Ferrante, remote learning teacher, Greg Banks, remote learning teacher, and Trish Buzan, remote learning teacher. Thank you, Dr. Harrison.
And at this time, we'd like to introduce Ms. Jean Sheehan to introduce Memorial Park staff.
Memorial Park has several new staff members this year, including Nicole Karen, our new school psychologist, Shannon Campbell, speech and language pathologist, grade 1 teacher Victoria Dinger, grade 2 teacher Maggie Gillen, grade 3 teacher Holly Colombo, grade 3 teacher Emily Creedon, Title I paraprofessional Michaela Drayton, and special ed paraprofessional Rebecca Shifley.
Thank you, Ms. Sheehan. And Ms. Michelle Shifley will introduce the Jefferson new staff.
I hope you can hear me because I don't think you can see me. We have 1 new staff member, Kristen Killian. She's actually not new. She was student teacher here. Then she became a para. She's a Rockland grad and she's our remote grade 1 teacher.
And now we'll have Dr. Linda Maniglia introduce the special education staff.
This is Jan. Wait a minute.
Dr. Maniglia, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Good morning. I'd like to welcome Deborah McGlynn to our Rockland district. Deborah was a long-term special ed teacher for Aston Elementary School last year. She also took a position as a special education in our extended school year program. Currently, Deb has been appointed as a remote special ed teacher for students that usually participate in substantially separate programs, but have opted out of our face-to-face instructional model this year to participate remotely. So welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Dr. Maniglia. At this time, Dr. Alan Cron will recognize our staff that has been with us for 25 years.
Can everyone hear me? Can you hear
Yes.
me? Okay. So first, I would like to congratulate Karen Messier, 25 years of service, holding up her red apple. Let me take it out of the box. It's more effective that way. You can see it. They're very cool. So congratulations. I'd also like to congratulate, I don't know if you're able to put this one up, Peter Tolan at the high school, 25 years of service. And I think we have a photo of Peter. Just like we rehearsed it.
Is the picture not up?
No, it's not up.
Okay.
That's okay. We all know what Peter looks like. And finally, our third recipient of the Apple for 25 years of service, Dave Galemi. Congratulations to our 3 25-year award recipients. Thank you.
At this time, Ms. Jill Maroney, our chairman of the school committee, would like to say a few words.
She's having trouble getting on.
Okay. So you cannot see my slideshow, I take it.
That's correct, Colleen. Bottom of your screen in the middle should be share desktop.
Okay. Well, this is the third computer I've been on this morning and it does not show that.
You might not be in full screen. Toggle your green button up in
Okay.
the upper left-hand corner. You should see something at the bottom that says share desktop.
No, it's not happening. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Let's just jump to our compulsory annual notification, starting with Jane Hackett, our business manager. Jane, you there?
Jane's not on, Colleen.
I do not see Jane.
Okay. Linda Maniglia, Dr. Linda Maniglia will talk about our restraint training and supports.
Okay, I can send my PowerPoint to everyone. I'll put it on our website after. But today I'm going to review mass regulations and protocols for restraint and seclusion. Okay, this is a mandated training that we do annually for all staff. Regulation 603 CMR 46 governs the use of restraint for all of our students that are educated in federally funded elementary or secondary education programs in Massachusetts. And this would include all public schools, charter schools, collaborative schools, virtual, public or private day schools, DYS, and houses of correction. So physical restraint is direct physical contact that prevents or significantly restricts a student's freedom of movement. Restraint should only be used in emergency situations or as a last resort, when a student's behavior poses as a threat of assault or serious harm to themselves or others, or when we've already tried less intrusive alternatives and the child has not responded to them. Okay, next slide. There are several types of restraints. There's mechanical, medication, seclusion, and prone. Mechanical refers to any device or equipment that restricts a student's movement, and this does not include any device that one of our trained staff might use, such as a stander to help students, get proper body alignment, or maybe a harness that we would use when we're transporting a student to make sure that they're safe during the transport. Medical, only medicine that a licensed physician has authorized or a parent or guardian has given us consent is appropriate to use. Seclusion is when we involuntarily confine a student and the student is alone in any room or area, and the student is prevented from leaving that area. Seclusion is also prohibited. And finally, prone restraint is when we place a student face down on a surface or the floor, and we apply a little bit of physical force to keep the student there. So again, all of these types of restraints are prohibited in public schools. Next slide. Some less intrusive alternatives that are acceptable are a brief, light physical contact to promote student safety, when we redirect a child, we comfort a child, or we use a physical escort. Next slide. So physical escort is a temporary holding or touching a student without force. We usually hold a child by their hand, their wrist, their arm, shoulder, or the back. And it's only used to guide a student that is agitated or has escalated to bring them to a safe place where they can calm down. So as I previously stated, all staff must receive this general training annually. In addition, many of our program staff and each of our
Hi,
buildings.
Jill, it's Dave Murphy. I don't see you in the meeting. Did you get my email?
Whoops.
They will participate in in-depth training and the use
And no-
of physical restraint. Next slide, please. Okay, oh, that's it. So in Rockland, our staff are trained in CPI, which is a nonviolent crisis intervention, and your administrators in each respective building will post a list of trained personnel so that you would know who to maybe go to for support. And again, it takes all stakeholders, students, staff, and families to ensure safety in our schools. So if in the event that we do restrain a student, staff must immediately inform their building principal and provide them with a written detailed report within 1 school working day. Any restraint that exceeds 20 minutes must also be reported to your building administrator, and you must be able to seek their approval to continue with that restraint, especially if the student still appears to exhibit aggressive behaviors. Once staff notify the principal in turn must verbally notify parents or guardians within 24 hours, and then follow up with a written report within 3 school working days. Parent and/or the students are allowed to comment on that incident report if they want to. So Regulation 603, CRM 46 also addresses seclusion and timeout. We previously talked about seclusion as the involuntary confinement of a student alone in a room or area from which the student is prevented from leaving. Timeout, on the other hand, is an acceptable calming behavioral support strategy. During a timeout, a student is temporarily separated from a learning activity or a classroom. Sometimes it's the student's choice to leave and go to a calming area until they can stabilize themselves, but it also can be a staff directive. And with a timeout, staff always has to be with the child or at least in close proximity to the student. Anytime a student is removed from an instructional area due to inappropriate behaviors, it's considered to be a timeout. And any area that we use for a timeout always must be clean and safe for our students. Again, if a timeout lasts longer than 30 minutes, you must notify your building administrator and get their approval to continue the timeout. Again, we would continue only if the student is exhibiting, escalated or aggressive behaviors. As soon as that child stabilizes, we would want to bring them back to the instructional classroom. So if and when a student is showing signs of escalating behaviors, we should try to clear that area as quickly as possible, make sure that we remove any kind of materials that could be used as a projectile or a weapon such as scissors, sharp pencils, anything that they could throw. After that, we would try to escort the escalated student to another environment, and if that's not possible, then we would remove the other students in the classroom to another safe, quiet environment. Rockland is a PBIS district, which means we use a multi-tiered framework of positive behavioral interventions and supports. PBIS framework has and will continue to improve the social, emotional, behavioral, and academic outcomes of our students. Please be aware, if a student has a behavior intervention support plan, all staff working with this child, please be familiar with their plan so that it is implemented across the student's day and in all environments. Please note that physical restraint cannot be included in a behavior intervention plan or a student's IEP, which is their individual educational plan. Our stance in Rockland is that restraint should only be used as a last resort in emergency situations when a student poses a threat of assault or serious physical harm to themselves or others, or when we have tried various less intrusive interventions and the child has not responded positively to them. So in summary, preventing escalating behaviors is our goal. Time out is a positive calming intervention, which is appropriate to use. But remember, we must always, staff should always be with the child or in close proximity to make sure that you can observe the child and make sure they're safe at all times. Seclusion or confining a student against their will without supervision is prohibited. There will be program staff in each of your respective buildings that will receive that in-depth training, so make sure you know who they are. And finally, although restraint should be used as a last resort, there is really nothing in the regulations that precludes a teacher, employee, or anyone agent in our school from using reasonable force to protect students, themselves, or any other people that might be in the area when a child does escalate and is in serious physical harm or to themselves or to others. So I thank you for listening to this presentation. And again, I look forward to seeing and working with all of you this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maniglia. At this time, I'd like to go back to introducing new staff. Ms. Marilyn Smith, Principal of Eston School, could you please introduce your new staff?
Sure. Joining us for our third year, but as a first year teacher, because she was a long-term sub for 2 years, is Sherry McGuire in grade 1. And this year we have a big role to fill in our school nurse. And joining us is Bernadette Hannigan, who has lots of experience with pediatrics, and we welcome her and all her knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Ms. Jill Maroney, Chairman of the Rockland School Committee, would like to say a few words. Ms. Maroney, you here?
I am here. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Murphy, for helping me get here today. Good morning and welcome back. Last year, I stood in front of all of you in the auditorium. I spoke about making the decision to run for school committee, now 3 years ago. I explained that I believe in all of you, our RPS faculty. This year may be different in many ways. We are asking you to teach in ways that you have never taught before. But on behalf of myself and my fellow school committee members, we believe you still will make a difference in our students' lives. We believe you have their backs. You want them to succeed. You will support them and help them learn. You will always slow down to make sure they understand. And of course, you are their biggest cheerleaders. You are smart, dedicated, and passionate. 3 years ago, I knew you would make me proud to represent you on the school committee. This year, that still holds true. This year will be a challenge, but there is no doubt in my mind that you will rise to beat it. Thank you for all you are doing for our children in Rockland. And that's all I have.
Colleen, you're muted.
Thank you. Okay, so just to back up, as we muddle through this whole morning orientation, the first 2 weeks of remote learning with students, teachers, and students, the same thing will be happening, and it'll just be a work in progress as we move forward. So this is Ms. Jane Hackett from our business office, and she will present the compulsory notifications.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, Jane Hackett, School Business Administrator. I am going to be reading the laws. I will not be reading the laws, but I will be summarizing them. And please make sure that today you have signed in with your principal so we can make sure and verify that you have listened to me read this to you. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination, exclusion from participation, and denial of benefits based on race, color, or national origin in programs or activities. We cannot exclude anyone from participating in programs or activities based on race, color, or national origin. The Equal Opportunities Act of 1974 prohibits the denial of equal educational opportunity in public schools on account of race, color, sex, or national origin. All students at Rockland Public Schools have the right to an equal educational opportunity no matter what race, color, sex, or national origin. Title IX of the Educational Amendments of 1972 prohibits discrimination, exclusion from participation, and denial of benefits based on sex in educational programs and activities. We cannot exclude students from educational programs and activities based on their sex. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibits discrimination, exclusion from participation, and denial of benefits based on disability in programs or activities. We cannot exclude students from participating in activities based on a disability. Title II of the American with Disabilities Act of 1990 prohibits discrimination, exclusion from participation, and denial of benefits on the basis of disability. We cannot exclude students from participation or deny benefits on the basis of disability. The Individuals with Disability Education Act of 2014 governs special education programs relative to assistance and services. This act governs special education programs relative to assistance and services. The Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015 provides federal funding to school districts. The federal funding must be appropriated for improving achievement of the disadvantaged, professional development for teachers, family engagement, language instruction for English learners, and education for the homeless. Next is the confidentiality of student records. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974 protects the privacy of students' education records and gives parents certain rights with respect to those records. Individual student records are confidential. This extends to giving out individual addresses and telephone numbers. What does this mean? What is confidentiality? Protecting all personally identifiable data. In addition to the student name and address, it includes the parents' names and other family members and personal identifiers such as Social Security and student number. The exception would be for a quote, directory, unquote, information unless the parent has refused to have that information released. Confidentiality applies to discussions, both verbal and written. Things to think about are who, what, where, and why. Who is or could be listening? Who or what is being discussed? Where is the discussion taking place? And why is the discussion taking place? The discussion should occur in a private place, such as the teacher's classroom. Discussions in public places should be avoided. Confidentiality could be violated if conversations take place in such areas as school halls, the playground, busy teachers' lounges, or through social networking. Legitimate educational sharing. There's no problem with confidentiality if the parties to the discussion are school officials with legitimate educational interest and the information will help them work with the child. Discussions or gossiping about students or families regarding non-educational issues violates confidentiality. Privacy of educational records. Students' records, files, and documents and other materials which contain information directly related to a student are confidential. Individual educational plans must be maintained in a secure setting. Emails are public records. Therefore, Be sensitive to violations of confidentiality when sending emails. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Most health-related records kept in school are subject to the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Next is our anti-bullying policy. The Rockland Public Schools will not tolerate any unlawful or disruptive behavior, including any form of bullying, cyberbullying, or retaliation in our school buildings, on school grounds, or in school-related activities, and will take prompt action to end that behavior and restore the student that is being bullied, who is also referred to as, quote, the target, end quote, sense of safety. The policy is on our website. Please refer to it for more specifics. Also, the principals will review this policy in more detail with their staff. What is bullying? Bullying is the repeated use by one or more students of a written, verbal, or electronic expression, or a physical act or gesture, or any combination thereof, directed at a target that either causes physical or emotional harm to the target or damage to the target's property, places the target in reasonable fear of harm to him or herself or damage to his or her property, creates a hostile environment at school for the target, which is when bullying causes the school environment to permeate with intimidation, ridicule, or insult that is sufficiently severe or pervasive to alter the condition of a student's education, or it infringes on the rights of the target at school, or materially and substantially disrupts the education process or the orderly operation of the school. This includes cyberbullying, which means bullying through the use of technology or any electronic communication. If any staff member suspects bullying, please make an oral report to the administration. All accusations of bullying will be investigated. Thank you for listening. And again, please make sure that you've signed in with your building secretary to make sure that you receive credit for attending this required training. Thank you and have a great school year, everybody. It is so great to have you all back, and those who are furloughed who will be seeing this on recording, welcome back to you as well, and can't wait to see you in person.
Thank you, Ms. Hackett. This time, I'd like to introduce Freya Leahy, our social work director, to speak about mandated reporting.
Good morning. I'm Freya Leahy, adjustment counselor at the high school. Mandated reporting and suicide prevention have always been two incredibly important aspects of our work. This year, the job of keeping kids safe is even harder. We are all mandated reporters, mandated to report suspected abuse or neglect. Most of us haven't seen live and in person our students in 5 months. When they enter our building and classrooms, they're going to have some stories to tell. We need to be listening. When we are invited into our students' home virtually, we need to be assessing. Outside of the self-report of students, we are watching for changes in behavior, mood, appearance, or a significant drop in performance or participation. Also, watch for signs of self-harm or cutting in older students or any reference to self-harm. These also must always be addressed, reported to school administration or your building adjustment counselor. Any and all questions of abuse, neglect, or concerns about potential self-harm should be brought to your building administration as soon as you become aware of them. These can all be indicators that a child could be at risk to themselves or a victim of abuse or neglect. Any question about a student's safety or well-being, whether it is a conversation you overheard, an unexplained injury, or a student's report of abuse or neglect, is worthy of a conversation with your building principal, guidance counselor, or adjustment counselor. Please don't hesitate to report any concern. This is as important as ever, given that we will go a week in between seeing our students. We don't have the luxury of seeing them every day to be able to assess their safety or follow up with them in person. Please don't hesitate. By please don't hesitate, I literally mean report it as soon as possible. Please do not wait until the end of a school day to reach out. If you send an email in the middle of class, please follow up with a phone call at the end of class. It's always easier to address these concerns when the student is still in the building or it is between working hours. Trust your gut. If something seems wrong, it probably is. Just remember, on a comforting note, it's not our job to investigate suspected abuse or neglect. It's just our job to report it. Please reach out to your building adjustment counselors anytime. Thanks so much. And remember to put your oxygen mask on before helping others with theirs. Make taking care of yourself a priority this year. Next, our beloved technology coordinator performing feats of a superhero with our one-to-one technology initiative, Tim Wells.
Hey, Free, thanks for that introduction. Necessary. Hey, welcome everybody. It's going to be an interesting year for all you new hires, especially. You've hit the job lottery. I really believe that. This is a great place to work. Since March, the principals, the superintendent's office, they've really been working their butts off here. A lot of people know it, but a lot of you people don't know how much they've been doing. Everybody that was here for those few months, they've done an incredible job. You might not like the job that they've done, but you got to give it to them that they've done a great job. So I'm here to talk about your internet footprint, your presence on the internet. You guys can do whatever you want. You were hired for a particular reason. You're hired because you are supposed to be mature, supposed to be intelligent, probably good test takers to get past those MTELs. Congratulations to all of you who can do that. So with all those positive things being said, you need to understand that most people here aren't going to creep you. There's a few people in the district who might. I'm not one of them. I know Dr. Cron's not one of them, and your principal's got far more better things to do than to be checking out your social media sites. So it's up to you to police yourself. You know what's right, you know what's wrong. You're big people. There are also town people here that will certainly see a new hire and want to see what they have out there. So just be aware of the footprint that you're leaving out there. Again, mature, intelligent, bachelors, masters, a lot of you. So use it, okay? This is going to be really, really brief, guys, because I'll probably touch base with each of you very soon. But I do want to talk about email particularly, because we had a couple of issues this past summer where, to me, it was obvious, but apparently it wasn't obvious to everybody. Dr. Cron, in the years that he's been here as principal and superintendent, I don't think anybody has ever received an email from Dr. Cron from his Gmail address, especially one that says dr.allen.cron.rockland.schools.org@gmail.com. Okay? Don't open it up. The same thing happened to Beth. An email that was obviously trolling, obviously phishing. You guys have got to use the intelligence that got you this job, and don't be click happy. I'll be saying that throughout the whole year. Don't be click happy. It just causes issues, and everybody's got enough issues to deal with without having to deal with stuff that are human made, okay? So that's all I'm going to say right now. Just use your head. Welcome. This is a great place to work. Don't screw it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. At this point, I would like to introduce Suzanne Conran. She's a financial advisor with Horizon Financial Group, and she'll explain and give you information on 403B investments. This is her information if you need to contact her.
Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Suzanne Conran. So weird year doing this after I don't know how many years of going to the assembly hall and seeing all of you. Yeah, it's just different, but I think that's just how this year has been. I actually jotted down 3 words that I feel galvanize what 2020 has been: vulnerable, anxious, and fearful. I think it's safe to say we've all felt these emotions this year. And I think it's also safe to say that no one likes these emotions. these are not feelings that engender a whole lot of comfort. In the same vein, when you think about your retirement, you want to feel confident. You want to be comfortable, secure, and impervious. As difficult as this year has been, I feel it really has helped to clear what is important. And I think the one thing that is important for all of us is that we need to be comfortable. We need to feel comfortable. We don't want to feel vulnerable. A 403B is one way that can help you plan for your future security. So what is a 403B? As many of you know, if you've listened to me year after year, you probably have a pretty good rubric of what it is. For those of you who this is your first year, welcome. I'll go through it really quickly. There are 3 benefits that are in the 403B. You get pre-tax savings. So instead of paying the federal and the state, whatever you shelter, you actually are able to see less money coming out of your paycheck when you make your contribution. And that's because this money comes out before you're taxed. So the federal and the state think you're making fewer dollars. So guess what? They have to tax you less. Second benefit has to do with how this money grows. It grows on what is called a tax deferred basis. All that means is this money that you invest, it grows and it compounds and nobody can tax you on it until you retire. Third benefit actually has to do with when you do your taxes at the end of the year. Easiest way to put it is if you're used to getting a return at the end of the year and you participate in the 403B and make contributions, well, guess what? You're now going to get a bigger return. If you're used to owing at the end of the year, you actually will owe less. You don't have to hire a tax specialist to get that benefit. It automatically happens. Rockland is different than many of the school systems that I work in. You are self-directed, and all that means is you can get started in your 403B at any time. You can stop it at any time. You can increase or decrease it at any time. The minimum that you can do per pay period is $25. The maximum, if you're under the age of 50, is $19,500 per year. If you're over age 50, you actually can contribute more. It's $26,000 per year. Other question that people often ask is, well, I think I want to stay here in Rockland forever, but in the event that I move, what happens to my 403B? It's portable. You can actually take this wherever you go, whether you stay in a public school, it will follow you where you go. If you go into the private sector, you can actually roll it into a 401k. So it's not a situation that you set something up and then, you have to leave it. It actually will go with you. I think it bears repeating. You're in a great system. I would imagine now that you are here and you've likely found your forever home. So the portability is probably not that important. If you have an old 457, which is an OBRA plan, or you worked for a municipality, a city, or state position, if you have an old 403B or you have a 401k, going back to that portability, those are all accounts that you can you roll in to one account. There's no tax ramifications if you do that, and it helps keep everything together so you don't have little pots of money all over the place. I know that Colleen put my card up. I want to let you know I am still working remotely. I would imagine that it's going to be that way for quite some time. I don't want to be in a situation that I am meeting different people in different places that I can't control the environment that I'm in. So for the time being, I am still working remotely. To that end, if you have questions, feel free to call me on my cell. You may text me or email me. My office number is on there. Probably not a good place to get a hold of me because you won't get me. But I hope everybody has a great year, and I wish you all good luck. And thank you for this time.
Thank you, Suzanne, very much. You're always there for us every year to present. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Okay, our keynote speaker is Principal Baruti Kefele, and I don't believe he is on yet. David Cable Murphy is contacting him to make sure he gets on so we are able to listen to him. So in the meantime, I will speak on his background. So Principal Baruti Kefele, he's a highly regarded urban educator in New Jersey. He's been doing that for more than 20 years. He has distinguished himself as a master teacher and a transformational school leader. As an elementary school teacher in Orange, New Jersey, in addition to being named the East Orange School District and Essex County Public Schools Teacher of the Year, Principal Kefele was a finalist for New Jersey State Teacher of the Year and a recipient of the New Jersey Education Association Award of Excellence. As a middle and high school principal, Principal Kefele led the transformation of 4 new New Jersey urban schools, including the mighty Newark Tech, which went from a low-performing school in need of improvement to a national recognition, and which was recognized 3 times by U.S. News and World Report as one of America's best high schools. One of the most sought-after school leadership experts and education speakers in America, Principal Kefele is impacting America's schools. He has delivered over 2,000 conference and program keynotes, professional development workshops, parenting seminars, and student assemblies over his 34 years of public speaking. An expert in the area of attitude transformation, Principal Kefele is the leading authority on providing effective classroom and school leadership strategies toward closing what he coined the attitude gap. He is the author of 11 books, including his 6 national bestsellers: Closing the Attitude Gap, Motivating Black Males to Achieve in School and in Life, The Teacher 50, Is My School a Better Place Because I Lead It, The Principal 50, and The Aspiring Principal 50. His latest book, The Assistant Principal 50, was released in May of 2020. Principal Kefele is a recipient of more than 150 educational, professional, and community awards, including the prestigious Milken National Educator Award and the National Alliance of Black School Educators Hall of Fame Award. He was included into the East Orange, New Jersey Hall of Fame, and the city of Dickinson, Texas proclaimed him. The city of Dixon, Texas proclaimed February 8th, 1998 as Baruti Kefele Day. Oh, I think I see Principal Kefele in the audience.
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Principal Kefele, I've already introduced you, so everyone has your background story that I just introduced a little while ago. So the microphone is yours. We can see you full screen. So thank you very much for joining us, and it's all yours.
All right, and I have the hour, right? Is that I have the full hour?
You have the full hour. Yes, you do.
Okay. It's all mine. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Good to be virtually in Massachusetts, in Rockland School District. It's great to see you all virtually this morning. And I was supposed to come on here earlier and just kind of be a part of you guys, and things that kept going on here. So, but here I am, ready to go. You know, I had and I need to also say good morning to Dr. Cron, whom I believe is on this call, because I can see his photo here. So good morning to you, Superintendent Cron. And you know, we had I've learned a little bit about your district, and I know that there's some discussion that's required around equity and social justice and diversity and race and all those things. And we're going to jump into that a little bit. But before I get there, I just want to remind everybody, you know, I started teaching back in 1988, Brooklyn, New York City, and then had a second first time teaching in my home state of New Jersey. So in other words, went to New York to kind of try it out, loved it, and then came back to Jersey, the city that birthed me, the city that raised me, East Orange, New Jersey. And I started over again here. So I had two firsts, and both firsts were horrible. They were absolutely horrible. They're so horrible that I've said for many years that it's always a good thing for me when I see the former students. But when I see, I mean, if I ever saw a student from my first year in Brooklyn, New York City, the only thing I could say to them is hello and I'm sorry. You know, that's it. And then if a conversation flowed from that, fine. And the reason I would say I'm sorry is because I didn't know anything. I didn't go to school for education. I went to school to be a businessman. I studied marketing, but I fell into education because it just felt like a life's calling. I said, the only place for me to be is in a classroom at that time, but I didn't know what I was doing. But interestingly, some of them have found me because of the power of social media and given me all this praise and thanks and accolades for the job I did. One of them particularly is a professor, a law professor at Columbia University in New York. And she reached out to me via Facebook not long ago and said, I just wanted to thank you for everything you did for me when you were my 5th grade teacher back in 1988 and 88, 89 school year. And I said, but I didn't do anything. She said, no, you did a lot. She said, I'm a law professor at Columbia because of you. And I don't know that I would have moved in that direction if it wasn't for what you gave me. And then I've met others who have said things comparable. And then when I came back to Jersey, several of those students are my Facebook friends. And they've said the same thing, but they're on my page a lot. So they see the things I type, and every now and then I'll type that those years were horrible for me, and they'll jump right on. And they'll say, no, they weren't, because you were the difference maker in my life. So here's the point that I'm making, I'm raising with you. As school is about to relaunch, I've come to the conclusion, and I came to this conclusion decades ago, and I've just been riding with it ever since. And that conclusion is that you and I, when the school is open, you are the #1 determinant of the success or failure of your students. Now, what am I saying? I know they have parents. I know they have community. I know they have family. I know they have relatives. I know they got all these other variables in their lives. And some of those variables are distractions, right? Some of those variables are temptations, but they're variables all throughout their lives. But see, here's the conclusion I reached. I said, I get that. I understand growing up in a household with a lack of support from parent, or growing up in a household where it's a relief to get out of the house. That wasn't my reality, but I understand it because I've met so many young people in that predicament. So leaving home is a relief, and I get to be in my school, a place of refuge for me. Well, I said to myself, I said, I'm not going to dwell on the things I have no control over. I'm not going to do that as an educator. I'm not going to dwell on the things I have no influence on. I'm not going to do that as an educator. In fact, I don't do that in any aspects of my life. If I've got influence, then I'm coming at it. If I've got control of it, then I'm coming at it. But if I can't control it, then I'm going to look at areas where I do have control, or I'm going to, if I can't influence, I'm going to look at areas where I do have influence. So as a teacher, I said, that classroom has my name above the door. My name is up there. But it wasn't the only name there, because I said, this class is my room, but it's not my room singularly. I said, my students, it's really their room, and I'm just the guy in there that's teaching them. So we gave the room a class, the classroom a name, and stopped using the room number, because the room number was like so impersonal, right? I said, let me give it a name. So we came up with a name collectively. We said this classroom is called the Mind Zone, M-I-N-D, Mind Zone. And then we gave it a definition. We said the purpose of this name is that this is a zone, this is a place, this is a laboratory where we take your mind and transform it into greatness, the mind zone. So I said, you know, this mind zone, this room, which happened to be room 303, I said, I have maximum influence over what happens in this room. I don't have maximum influence over what happens outside of the room. So I can't dwell on that. But when they come into this space, this lab, as I called it, because the other name that I use for classrooms are learning laboratories. So we call them learning labs. So I said, this lab, this place called the mind zone, I got this. I got this. If I don't have anything else, I got that. So now I come full circle with you, Rockland Public Schools. The number one determinant of your success, of the student's success or failure, is you. And see, for me, I made a decision. I'm not failing in this. If I could convert it to a game very quickly, I'm not losing this game. I'm not losing this match. I may lose in other things in life, but I'm not losing this. And me losing means my students are underperforming. That's what the translation is. I meet people, you know, they've got a certain aura about them, and they in the education field, and you know, I'm doing big things, I'm getting it done, all that. And then you look at the data, but where? Right? I mean, you feel good about yourself. That's good. But the proof is in the pudding. And I want to see the data. I want to see the evidence. What's the evidence that you're who you think you are? See, so always using the data to drive me, right? To drive me to another height, to another level of accomplishment. So I want you to virtually repeat after me. I am the number one determinant of the success or failure of my students. I challenge everybody on the call this morning to repeat that to yourselves every day, and to put that onus on your shoulders that I got this. I got this. We're gonna do this. And those of you out there and you've been achieving at high levels, teacher of the year and all that kind of stuff, great. I was recognized as teacher of the year in my, if I get the math right, in my fifth year. And it was amazing, because it wasn't just the school level, it was the school level, it was the district level, it was the county level. And then I was finalist for New Jersey State Teacher of the Year after 5 years of teaching. But so after I got those awards and I put them all in my classroom for my students to see, because they knew I was still a relatively young teacher, I said, I'm not done yet, y'all. I got so much more to accomplish via yourselves. So this is just a stepping stone to get to where I want to be. But that school, as I jump into this presentation entitled Equity, Social Justice Education, Race, and the Classroom, that school, it was called Ashland Elementary School. And right in the heart of a city called East Orange, New Jersey. If you never heard of East Orange, I'm sure you heard of Newark. And East Orange is right next to Newark. And a lot of folks that are in East Orange came from Newark, right? So East Orange is right there, and it's very urban. It's free and reduced lunch was somewhere around 90%. Just I don't even want to talk about the city. It's just a very urban place. So all the trappings of being in an urban environment, that's what it was. The uniqueness of East Orange is the demographic, the racial demographic. I grew up there, and it was very close to 100% Black when I grew up there. So all the residents Black, all the folks in charge Black. It was a Black world. And growing up in that city, I literally, and I'm sure I can speak for most of the people there, the children, I literally thought the world was black, right? Because that's all we saw, right? That's, you know, you go into the school, that's what you saw. I mean, of course, we saw white teachers, don't get me wrong, but you saw a lot of black principals, a black mayor, the black police chief, black fire chief, black superintendents, everything. So I thought the world was black. I found out later, if this was about a 2 or 3 hour presentation, it would be relevant for me to talk to you about when I discovered that it wasn't, right? And how my wheels fell completely off. And it took me time to readjust, to readapt to the world. But that's for another presentation, because we don't have that kind of time this morning, right? But here at Ashland, as I broach this topic of equity and social justice, race, diversity, etc., I knew there was a best kept secret from the students, and not just my students, but from students of color across the country. And in my case, the students were black, but in a more general sense, students of color. I said there's a best kept secret, because the age-old question in education across America is this: how do we close the achievement gap? That's the question. That's the question that everybody's asking, and they've been asking it for a long time. When I walked into that school, I didn't start in September in '88. I started in November. A teacher had died, a long-time veteran, 30 some odd years. It may have been even 40, and a very popular teacher. He passed in the middle of the school year, and it created a vacancy, and he was beloved. So, and this was in New York, not the school I just showed you. And I got hired. And you talk about somebody new starting in November, and you're replacing a beloved teacher. That was not easy. It wasn't easy by any stretch, because I was being measured by the students by him. So it took, but I think it was a good way to start for me in terms of just going in there. It couldn't have been a worse situation. So I think it helped me to grow. But I went in there with this realization that there's been this secret being withheld from Black children, or children of color, to go beyond Black children. And that secret was the knowledge of who they are, historically speaking. My students didn't know who they were. I mean, they at best, they knew that they were descendants of the period of enslavement. But if that's your best in terms of your knowledge of history, you're pretty much in trouble. Because if that's your best is a deficit. You don't know the glories. You don't know the greatness, right? You all you know is the worst period in the history of people in this country. That's all you know. So when I look at, let's translate that into 2020. If I'm looking at young people that happen to be African American, and they're tracing their roots to enslavement, and that's the best they have in terms of understanding, knowledge, appreciation of history of a period of enslavement, and thereby being subhuman, right? Property. That's not a good thing, because now you yourself, you're at a deficit, because you can't talk about the glories. You can't talk about the victories. You can't talk about the good. All you can talk about is enslavement. And I need you to be knowledgeable of it, don't get me wrong, but I need you to know so much more. So I decided, because a lot of people used to ask me, I don't hear it too much now, but how did you become a state finalist in New Jersey, Teacher of the Year, in such a short period of time? You were a rookie. And I said, because I let the students in on the secret. So in other words, there's a curriculum. Curriculum says whatever it says. A master teacher, which I was not at that time, but I guess I evolved into one. A master teacher can take a curriculum and teach a curriculum, but go far beyond the curriculum. A master teacher can take a curriculum and breathe life into it. In fact, I'll even show you. We'll call this a curriculum. The master teacher does this to a curriculum. Breathes life into it. And now that which is not in the curriculum that master teacher says, let me fill in the blanks. So I taught the curriculum. Nobody could accuse me of violating anything. I taught the curriculum, but there were holes in it. I got another prop here. Let me show you this prop here. There were holes in it, like this, right? So all I did, I took the curriculum and I filled in the holes. That's all I did. So I couldn't give them this. It had too many holes. Let me give you this. So now, as I gave them that, achievement levels began to soar. Language arts, mathematics were the areas being tested back in those days. The sole areas being tested. So the achievement levels began to soar. The volume of students on the honor roll began to soar. The way they felt about themselves began to soar, right? And then the attention on me as their teacher began to intensify. Like, what's going on in there? What are they doing? I said, well, what I'm doing, I'm filling those holes in. You know, like in the wintertime, you get the potholes in the street from the salt, from the snow. And then you find folks like bringing tar and filling in the holes. I just got my shovel and brought my tar and started filling in them holes. And now these young people began to soar, and we're outscoring everybody in the building. Because I'm using these books that you see on the screen just as a sample. There was so much that I brought in there, but I wanted them to know their story. Said differently, I wanted them to know who they are, historically speaking. So then I move on. After 10 years in education, I become a principal. And I'm the principal of the school you see in the picture, Sojourner Truth Middle School. And there's a story that goes with that as well. I go into as soon as I'm hired, I have a meeting with the superintendent. I mean, as soon as I'm hired. And I said, Doc, my success in the classroom, I don't even know if you realize why I was successful in terms of how I was able to be culturally relevant for the students. And I definitely need to do that here at the height, in my principalship. I need to be the same guy, but just in my leadership capacity. So we talked about it, and he gave me permission. He said, I'll let you do what you're asking. I said, yeah, I want to fill those holes. I want to make sure that these youngsters know who they are historically. Because now it's not just my kids, 25 kids in a classroom. Now I got 700 young people. And of the 700, I probably got 680 of them that have no sense of history beyond slavery. So can we tweak curriculum? Language arts, science, social studies, mathematics, etc. And I promise you, those sixth graders that come into that school with me, by the time they leave me at 8th grade, will be the #1 school in this entire school district. He said, I'm gonna let you do it, but I'm gonna hold you accountable. No problem, sir. So we went on and went to work. And once again, I had to introduce these young people to their history, but not just in America, but I had to introduce them to their history beyond America, in Africa. We started with ancient Egypt, Nile Valley contributions to civilization, and worked our way to African-American history. Short story, because I can spend a whole day on just this one slide in terms of what we accomplished. But the short version is that we transformed not only what we were doing in the classroom, but we transformed the entire culture of a building. In a diverse situation where you don't have a school that's all Black like mine, but you've got a school that you have white students, Asian students, Latino, so you got everybody, the result will be the same. Because, for example, for my white students, they're already getting this through American history. They're seeing themselves from the beginning to the present. It's the students of color who are not seeing themselves. They'll see Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, right? But I'm talking about going much further than that. So it's just a matter of bringing them up to speed. My Latino students, in terms of their own history and relating to them culturally, it's just a matter of being intentional about them. So now as we were doing that, and as we were intentional about the students that attended our schools, it's like we took into consideration who's sitting in these desks, and are we speaking directly to them? So now, what happened? I was able to go to that superintendent when those 6th graders were 8th graders and said, you see, Doc, I told you what we were going to do. We were not only #1 in the district, as I said we would be, but we were #1 in the entire state of New Jersey of schools of similar demographics, right? Meaning not all Black schools, but schools that were urban, Black and or brown, and poor. We said, so I had a lot of people asking, like, what'd you do? I said, it's very simple. We did not deny them of the secret, meaning the history of who they are. They didn't know. So because they didn't know, they gravitate to anything that looks like them, regardless of what it's doing. We said, let's make sure that they understand who they are, what they are, where they fall along the continuum of life. They got it. And they went and they got busy, and they felt that they could conquer anything. And when I say that, I mean anything that we put before them. I would speak to my students literally every day. Not a day went by in my 14 years of principalship that I didn't do that morning convocation and speak life into my students, speak power into my students, encourage them, inspire them with those words of inspiration. And then we would start the day, and usually my words were rooted in what you see on that screen. So moving on. Social unrest, social change, social justice, education. And the operative question is, well, what is it? You know, when George Floyd happened, America changed, you know that. I don't even have to preach that sermon, right? America made a shift. I never heard of George Floyd. I've never seen George Floyd, not to my knowledge anyway. And I would dare say most of you, maybe all of you, you probably never saw him either, all right? I didn't have reason to know him. If I speak in Minneapolis often, I speak in Houston often, so that's where he's from and that's where he lived. And who knows, maybe he was in my audience one time, I don't know. But I do know this. I know that I never shook his hand. I didn't know him, but now the world knows him. So I'm watching what's going on, and all these demonstrations and protests and rallies and marches and rebellion and outrage and even rioting. This picture I'm showing you here on the right is in New Jersey. Those are all young people in that crowd. There could be some adults, but that's a youth rally in Newark, New Jersey, and it's people wanted to see shifts. And in my mind, I said, this has implications for the schools. This has implications for the classroom. And the question becomes, do you and I, do we pretend it's not happening? Do we sweep it under a rug? Do we run away from it? Or do we circumvent it? Or do we meet it head on? So not only did it have implications for school and for classrooms, but it altered my life. And when I say my life, let me be very specific. It altered my life as a speaker, as a presenter, because I have a plethora of topics on my website that I speak on. I mean, it's almost endless, you know, just sitting on airplanes and creating workshop after workshop and keynote after keynote, and people invite me to speak on those topics. But there were 2 topics that I did not have on my website for a while. They're there now, but I didn't have them. Topic number 1, maintaining effectiveness during a global pandemic. That wasn't on my website. It wasn't on anybody's website. It wasn't on our radar. Topic number 2, maintaining effectiveness during social change. It's not on my website. But here come all the emails and all the calls, the invites. Principal Kafele, we want you to speak to our staff, our teachers, our conference, a virtual conference, all this. Every day of my life since the pandemic has come, every day there's a call, every day. I should say calls. But here's what they're asking. They're not asking for the things they asked me for before the pandemic. Principal Kafele, will you speak on closing the attitude gap, the Teacher 50, and motivating Black males, all my other topics. They're saying, Principal Kafele, would you speak to us on social justice education? Would you speak to us on maintaining effectiveness during a global pandemic? Would you speak to us about being effective when the children are on the Hollywood Squares boxes or the Brady Bunch boxes? Can you teach us? Can you talk to us about that? So I said, yeah. But first, I had to go back to the lab and I had to create all that. I get it. I understand it. But who knew? So now my point is, it has implications for the classroom. Let's go a little deeper here and talk about it. So notice this question here is in quotes. What do you recommend that I read? I could have worded this differently and put my name there, because that would be the actual question. Hey, Principal Kafele, what do you recommend that I read? In other words, man, I got hit with folks, educators, writing me from all over the country that said, I need to understand what's going on across America right now. And this was educators, all educators, but I have to be very specific with you, Rockland. These were my white colleagues. And they were flooding my email, my inboxes on Facebook, my DMs on Twitter, or just right on my public feed. Principal Kafele, I need to understand what's happening in the world right now. I need to understand systemic racism. I'm gonna use their language, not mine. I need to understand systemic racism. I need to understand privilege. I need to understand supremacy. I don't understand it the way I need to, because I'm seeing what's happening with the world. I'm seeing how the world is shifting. I'm seeing how it's unfolding. I'm a teacher. I'm a principal. I'm a superintendent. I need to understand this. So I said, fine. I got the books for you, but the teacher in me won't allow me to recommend the books that you're requesting of me. I know what you want. You want books that are critiques, analyses, breakdowns of racism. I said, I can't recommend those books to you. I have them. They're sitting right here, right? But I can't recommend those books to you, because they're great books. Don't get me wrong. No disrespect to any of those authors. I said, but if I recommend those books and you read those books, then you'll have a pretty good understanding, I guess, of racism in the 21st century. I said, but I need you to go deeper. I need you to understand the coexistence of blacks and whites in America, going back to when black folks first got here. That will make you understand racism, not somebody's critique and analysis of race relations. I want you to know the historical relationship, and then we could work our way to those contemporary books. So I said to them, but not only do I want you to go way back in terms of understanding that relationship, which is a 401-year relationship, but I want you to understand who these folks are that you want to understand, black folks. I want you to understand who they were before enslavement. So I said, I want you to read Introduction to African Civilizations. I'm saying to every educator on the call right now, if you've got, let's say you have at least one black student that you teach, that you service, that you lead, whatever your capacity. I'm making a strong recommendation right now this morning at about 9:41. I'm making a strong recommendation that you go right to Amazon and order this book. And I've been making this recommendation now since March. No, I'm sorry, that's not true. I've been making this recommendation since May, since George Floyd. And incredibly, a whole lot of educators nationally, these are my white colleagues again, they post this cover, which is a different cover now because this is an old copy. That's a 1985 copy. So, every several years, book covers change, but the content remains the same. So folks have been posting the cover on Twitter and tagging me and expressing outrage in their tweet that Principal Kafele, I'm a veteran teacher. I've been teaching 20 years. I've been teaching 25 years, 30 years, whatever it is, 15 years. And I've never been exposed to anything remotely like this. I feel like I've been lying to students for my entire career. I said, well, teacher, chances are you have been, right? But I'm glad that there's a context for me to make this recommendation to you, to dispel all the stereotypes that you may have had in your head that were fed to you through curriculum and pop culture over the years. Rockland, I'm saying, order this book. It will enlighten you if you have not read it. And that's just an introduction. That's not even the heavy duty. That's just an introduction. But secondly, let's talk about America Now, Before the Mayflower, by Lerone Bennett Jr. What a book. That book played a significant role in me being the man I evolved into. Such a powerful book. It starts with West Africa, which is where most African Americans can trace their roots, and then immediately goes into 1619 to the present to give the reader a fuller understanding. Because what's in this book, you didn't get K-12, not in the classroom. If you got it, you got it outside of the classroom. You didn't get it in the classroom. So there's so much that, so this would be what you got when you were growing up in the class. There were a lot of holes. This fills in the blank, because so many young people, yeah, they can tell you about Dr. King. They can tell you about Rosa Parks. They can tell you about Harriet Tubman. But then it starts to get real slim after that, right? Because they didn't get the full exposure. But not just the children, the teachers. It's the same thing. The teacher could tell you Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, but then the teacher's knowledge base starts getting slim. And that's not me painting with a broad brush, because it could be someone over there like itching to turn that mute off, saying, not me, Principal Confidentiality. I can break it down, right? So I get that. I know that there's some folks out there in the world that are very much conversant in the history. But history before the Mayflower, that bold print, History of Black America, that's not the title, that's the subtitle. But I took the paper, the jacket off this book when I got it, because it was cumbersome for me to be reading, because it's a hardcover and I lost it. So the actual book has that thick title. But here I kept the jacket on. This is another powerful read, From Slavery to Freedom by John Hope Franklin. These are not children's books. I got these books on the screen because these are for the teacher. I'm saying if you've got one Black student, you need to be conversant. There's a I'm looking at my own life and looking at how it's shifting, how all of our lives, how they're shifting with this pandemic. And my life is completely shifted. I haven't been on an airplane since the beginning of March, and I live on airplanes, literally. I mean, half my life is on airplanes and sitting at airport gates. And I haven't been on a plane in so long. So now in my mind, as it's racing, and what are you going to do when are you going back on a plane anytime soon? And the answer is pretty much no. But I'm thinking, man, it sure would be nice to be in a school, in a university, teaching leadership, school leadership with this content, right? Sure would be a beautiful thing. And maybe that's where I'm going now. And I can expose more educators, particularly school leaders, who can in turn expose their staffs to what I'm presenting this morning, right? So let me keep going. Last book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Man, I could spend about 6 hours talking about this book. I won't do it, obviously, but there's just so much there. It was written by Carter G. Woodson. And so going back to what I said about being conversant, here's a great point. When I was saying there's so many people that they know Dr. King, they know Harriet Tubman, they know Rosa Parks, but then it starts getting a little shallow after that. This name here, hey, Rockland, do you know Carter G. Woodson? And I'm gonna tell you this, if you require your students to do research or study or reading or assignments or assemblies or celebrations during Black History Month, if you do that and there's no mention of Carter G. Woodson, I'm gonna say this respectfully, you're doing a disservice to the whole month and to the students. And that's not just, I don't mean just your Black students now, I'm talking about all of your students. You're doing a disservice. Why, Principal Confidentiality? Because Black History Month was created for a specific reason. It didn't just pop up out of thin air. It was created for a specific reason. It was created by an individual. You're looking at him, Dr. Carter G. Woodson. He's the founder. How do you talk Black History Month and you don't talk about the founder? Who the founder it was walking Black history in and of himself. He was the second African-American to graduate from Harvard University with a PhD behind W.E.B. Du Bois. Imagine that. He's the author of 16 books. The Miseducation of the Negro, by far his most widely read. He was a professor and a dean at Howard University. He was a publisher. And I just keep, there's so much to this man. But what he's most known for, but what so few educators know, is that he founded something called Negro History Week in 1926, which evolved into Black History Month. He said, we need a week to appreciate, to read, to study, to research, to learn, and to celebrate Black history. So he created it the second week of February. Why the second week of February? Because on the one hand, Abraham Lincoln was born the second week of February, so he wanted to commemorate him. But on the other hand, Frederick Douglass was born the second week of February. We don't know the exact date because birth dates of slaves were not kept. But we know that it was somewhere in that second week. So when you introduce Black History Month to the students, they have to know who the founder was and what was his intent Dr. Carter G. Woodson. In fact, he has a paragraph in the book, which I've been reciting this paragraph for 34 years of public speaking. And the paragraph speaks to everything I just said. Let me share it with you very quickly. I'm just going to go from memory. He said, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or over yonder. He will find his quote unquote proper place and he will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary, period. He's saying, hey, learner, hey, student, as long as you're not a free thinker, as long as you're not an analytical thinker, as long as you're not a deep thinker, a critical thinker, you pose no threat, no challenge to anybody. But the day you go deep into your analysis is the day that you pose a threat, the day that you can step out into the world and declare that you're here and you're going to make things happen for yourself. When I was a 5th grade teacher, I made this book a part of my readings for my students. My students walked around proudly with their student and their consciousness in terms of the whole social justice piece, which I'm getting ready to dive into. They were there. They understood it because their teacher had the audacity to not withhold the secret, right? Let's keep moving. So social justice education. The question is, well, what is that? I'll tell you this much, Rockland. Social justice education, it just must be in all classrooms across America, and not just classrooms where there are students of color, because social justice is all encompassing. It's not just a black-white issue, right? Racial justice, then we're talking about black-white issues, et cetera, or along racial lines. But social justice, we're talking about everything imaginable, where there are people who say or who feel or who deem I'm not being treated fairly, right? So with what happened in America over the summer, beginning with George Floyd, we call it social justice, but to call it what it really was, we're talking about racial justice here, right? But we keep it under that umbrella. I think it's a little bit more palatable for a lot of people when we call it social justice education. So we'll call it that. Social justice, I should say. And then when we talk about the school, then we're talking social justice education. Now, I don't know, I've never been to Rockland before, but so I wouldn't have to be there to say what I'm about to say. I don't know who watching this call would be familiar with my work, right? I don't know. There's a lot of times I go places and the whole room knows my work. They've read my books and they're on my website reading blogs and all that. And then there are other places I go and they're like, wow, never heard of you. So it varies in terms of where I go. But folks that know my work know that I have a tendency of creating my own definitions. That's just being audacious. I'll see a definition, such a definition of equity or a definition of climate or a definition of culture. And I'll see multiple definitions. I'll say, I can't use them. Let me create my own. And then with folks that are into my work, then with a lot of them, they'll say, I'm going with Kafele's definition. So with social justice education, I read like all these definitions over the years and I said, man, they don't work for me because there's too much missing. So I said, let me go with my own. So I created a definition, which apparently there's a lot of districts using because it's comprehensive. It's all inclusive. So let me show it to you. It says, I'm gonna read it to you. I don't want you guys to read it without me reading it because I'm gonna put emphasis on 4 different areas that you see underscored. I said social justice education is the ongoing student-centered exploration, examination, and assessment of the world upon which your students exist through their own lens. That's critical. I'll talk about it. I'll talk about why in a minute. It's an interdisciplinary. That's critical. We'll come back to that though. Critical analysis of the world around them with respect to their relationship with it and how they fit in it via their own self expression. I'll come back to that. Relative to issues of social justice, social injustice, and overall systemic, institutional, and individual racism, whether it be unconscious, implicit, or explicit. Now, let's talk about this one here. Social justice education is an ongoing student-centered. Let's stop there. I'm saying it's about the student. It is not about the teacher at all. The teacher's role is as facilitator. Because when it's not about the student, see, when it's about the student, we're talking social justice education because of the word education. But when it's about the teacher's views and opinions and values, then it becomes not social justice education, but teacher-driven indoctrination, right? That's not what this is about. This is about the youngster. So student-centered exploration, examination, and assessment of the world upon which your students exist through their own lens. So if we're having a conversation about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, whomever, we all of us have an opinion. All of us have views. All of us, we've got a space we stand in on that. But it ain't relevant here. What's relevant is how is youngster interpreting this situation? What is youngster's perspective? It doesn't mean we're just letting youngster run free with it either, though, because you and I play the role of facilitator. So we're guiding the conversation, but we're not imposing. Here's how you need to feel about this. No, that's not what that is. That's just some indoctrination. That's all that is. And I don't care if you and the student are of the same racial identity, ethnic identity, cultural identity. It doesn't matter. It's still through their own lens. So said differently, what is life in the shoes of the youngster that I'm engaging in the conversation? It's giving youngster voice in his or her own classroom. But then I go on to say it's interdisciplinary, meaning this is not a side conversation like, okay, well, students will do math at 8 o'clock. We'll jump into language arts at 9. I'm just using round numbers. We'll jump into social studies at 10, science at 11. And then I guess at 12, we'll talk a little social justice. No, that's not what it is. Social justice is while I'm teaching that math lesson using these numbers, how have I crafted a lesson that I can take numbers and create a scenario that's rooted in social justice, right? Like an example that came off the top of my head just yesterday with a different group. I said, the city I grew up in, East Orange, with about 98% African-Americans right now, right? I said, but the businesses in East Orange, there's so few Black owned. So if I'm in a math problem, and I'm teaching on percentages and fractions, I can talk about the percentage of residents who happen to be Black versus the percentage of business owners who happen to be Black, and teach the lesson through the social justice, and then talk about the difficulty in obtaining a business loan and talk interest rates and all that kind of stuff. So now I'm teaching math, but I'm making it highly relevant via the social justice education. See, so it's not just the abstract, or if it's a word problem, it's not a word problem in a world that the youngster doesn't know, but it's a word problem that's so relevant to my life because I as a student, I walk these streets, I see these stores, I shop from these stores, and I do recognize that there are people that own the store that don't look like me. So now let me turn that into a math problem, because according to the achievement gap, Black students are at the bottom of that gap as far as math achievement. So now let me make the math relevant so that youngsters see self in the math, and now, poof, it makes sense now. And I'm understanding social justice a little bit differently because I'm attaching it to numbers and percentages, right? That's just off the top of my head, folks. It's a zillion different examples there. And again, in a diverse district, no difference. It's just being sensitive to who's in the classroom, but making it work nevertheless. It's not something that can only be done in a school that's predominantly children of color, right? It can be done anywhere, in any setting, regardless of the percentage. It's just the staff coming together, having some very deep, intense conversations about who we are, and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Let me keep going. So we said it's interdisciplinary. It doesn't mean we can't have the side conversation where it's just social justice. That's welcome. I'm just saying, don't lose sight of the fact that you can talk social justice in a language arts through a language arts curriculum, right? Reading or writing, you can listening or speaking. You can talk social justice certainly in a science through a science lesson. There's so much there. You can and obviously you can talk social justice in a history/social studies setting, but you can also do it in any CTE course, right? So if you have vocational technical courses, which is CTE, career technical, it has a place there. It's got a place in everything that's taught. Foreign language, you name it, it's got a place. It's just a matter of how we go about framing the discussion to make sure that it's there. And then the last highlighted area was self-expression. Again, we're talking about the student, right? So the commonality with the four, student-centered, through their own lens, interdisciplinary and self-expression, we're talking about the student himself, student herself. Let's keep it moving. So I asked the following questions then of you, Rockland. What are the reasons that social justice education either exists or doesn't exist in my classroom, right? So that's a question that you'd have to ask yourself, and that you'd have to answer. What made me bring it here, or why isn't it here? What's the reason, right? And of course, there, talk about reasons why it's not. We can talk for the next few hours in terms of reasons why it may not be there. Number 3, can my students, particularly my students of color, articulate beyond emotional reaction the injustices that surround them? So in other words, through the social studies education discussions in your classrooms, can the students go beyond, man, I'm mad about this, I'm outraged, I'm angry? Can they go back beyond that? Can they intellectualize it? Can they speak about it in a broader context? Can they demonstrate their understanding of what's happening before their eyes in America, in their world? Or is it reduced to, oh man, I'm so mad, I'm so upset, I'm so fired up, I'm so disgusted by what's happening? I mean, those are normal reactions, but can you go deeper with it? Are they in a classroom where the teacher is engaging them at that level? But watch this. Let's look at the teacher. Do I have the necessary cultural competency to engage my students in issues of social justice? Oh man. Because see, let me kind of link number 5 and 4 together. And matter of fact, 4, 5, and 6. What type of PD do I attend, professional development, toward developing a comfort and a confidence in engaging my students in issues of social justice? Oh man, right? And I'm not even finished with number 4. I wanted to bring these 3 together. So let's look at number 6. How knowledgeable am I on issues of social justice that directly impact my students of color? Man, those 3, those speak to the teacher. Those speak to the every adult in the building. What it could, because I can take the 3 questions and sum them up this way. What do I know? See, so going back to number 4, do I have the necessary cultural competency? See, there's an author friend of mine that wrote this book, Cultural Competence Now, right? By Vernita Mayfield. I'm gonna make a strong recommendation for this book as it relates to number 4, 5, and 6. Because there's this expression. It says, I can't teach what I don't know. And then included with that, I can't teach whom I don't know. So what level of competency do I bring? What type of PD do I attend toward developing a comfort and confidence in this area? And then how knowledgeable am I on issues of social justice that directly impact my students of color? Right. So that's that. But then as I guess I got time, then let's look at the equity side. Right. So we talked a little bit about social justice, but now let's look at equity. And the question I ask you, do my students have the benefit of learning from an equity mindset teacher? I want to pull another book off the shelf now on that one. Do my students have the benefit of learning from an equity mindset teacher? I need to start asking educators because I'm just sensing something, but I don't know definitively to speak intelligently about it, but I'm sensing something. I remember when the words growth mindset were like, that's all people were talking about. Growth mindset, growth mindset. And lately, I don't hear it. I don't think it disappeared, but I'm wondering, was this the latest fad, or are we still talking mindset? So when it was hot, Carol Dweck, mindset, that's the other book, right? So when it was hot, and this is what everybody was talking, they were restructuring their schools, growth mindset, growth mindset. People call me, Principal Clay, I want you to talk to our staff, but we want you to infuse growth mindset. They don't say that anymore, right? So now, I don't know. I need to do some research on it. But in the meantime, then here came this word equity. I said, equity. Where you guys been? I've been an equitable practitioner before I knew the word existed. I knew it existed within the realm of home ownership, the net worth of a home, the net worth of your stocks. But I never knew it had relevance in the classroom. So somehow it made its way into the classroom, and now everybody equity. We have to bring equity. Principal Confetti, come talk to us about equity. Okay. So I hope it never dies because it's so necessary. But I took the two words and combined them. Equity mindset. And I said, the equity mindset teacher. I said, do my students have the benefit of learning from an equity mindset teacher? I'm just asking the question to Rockland this morning. Are you an equity mindset teacher? Do you look at your students through an equity lens? Let's look at that. I went one too many. Let me go backwards. What is an equity mindset teacher? An equity mindset teacher, I gave it this definition. I said, an equity mindset teacher, and this is again me, making my own definitions because the ones I see just don't work for me. So here we are, and what a beautiful thing that so many folks use this. I said, an equity mindset teacher is a teacher who utilizes a variety of instructional strategies that consider the different learning styles, ability levels, social, emotional needs of all the learners in a student-centered, culturally responsive, culturally relevant, equity mindset classroom where student individuality and student identity distinctiveness matter exponentially. I created that because it's long, just like the social justice, because I needed everything in there. So just the screen alone, there's so much that can be said. We're talking about here. Let's look at the first part, instructional strategies that consider the different learning styles. We could stop right there and go in a workshop situation, we could go about 2 hours talking about that, if not longer. Because I want you to think about that student. Like I want you to think about young Principal Kafele, me. If I was one of your students at a younger age, let's put me in an elementary school. So I'm your 8-year-old, your 9-year-old student. And this question is being posed, or this statement is being made about instructional strategies that consider the different learning styles. Well, if that teacher had an auditory focus and taught through the ears of the student. A lecture approach, not very visual. And that was a primary modality that the teacher used. Young Principal Kafele, he's not going to do well. He will probably be one of your failing students. You will probably call the child study team to take a look at him to see if he has a learning disability. I'm just keeping it real, Rockland. You will probably call the parent in and give him a battery of tests, and perhaps he will wind up in a self-contained special needs environment because everybody thinks that young Principal Kafele has a learning disability. And the only issue with young Principal Kafele is he doesn't learn through his ear. That's all. And although I didn't make it to special needs, everything else I just said to you, I was giving you my autobiography, right? I was that young failing student, right? And everybody was teaching through my ear. I don't learn through my ear. I'll be 60 in less than 2 months from now, and I still cannot learn through my ear. If you give me stimuli that I have no prior experience with, and you lecture it to me, and you expect me to pass a test later on, I'm going to fail. Unless I got prior knowledge with it, I'm going to fail, right? Or I'm going to do subpar. I'm not going to ace it because I can't see it. I have to see it. A lot of times when I do a keynote, the organizer will say, I'll say to them, I want to set up my PowerPoint. They'll say, well, you're only doing a 45-minute keynote. Why do you need to plug in? I said, because you're going to have people in that audience that need to see words. And I don't, because they're not going to hear me through their ear. They'll hear words, but they can't process them because they're not auditory. I need some words up there so that they can read them and make sense of what I'm saying in some cases, like such as this long statement here. What is an equity mindset teacher? I could have just recited this without having the words up because I memorized this, but somebody might be sitting there like, what did you just say? It sounded like it was something important, but I need to see it to process it. Well, there are children in classrooms that don't have that luxury. And next thing you know, they're sitting in special needs environments, and some of them wind up on the school to prison pipeline. And the problem wasn't the youngster. The problem was the teacher didn't have enough variety in the strategies that were being used in that classroom. And you look at, since I'm here to talk a little bit about race, you look at Black students in particular, sitting in those environments where they're the minority. And so many Black students are visual learners, just based on research. And when they're in diverse settings, so many of them will wind up in these auditory environments. And then we wonder why they're not learning. Because instruction is being geared towards the wrong portion of their brains, and they're not processing it. And we're looking at all the other, are their parents involved? Are they studying? Are they doing the homework? Are they focused? Are they motivated? Looking at all these factors but failing to ask, are we teaching to the right portion of their brains? See, that matters too. So it has to be considered. So with that, as my time is running out, I'm not even going to explain this picture here. It's self-explanatory. I just want to give you the text to go with it, and that'll take me right to the end. The reality of that equity mindset classroom. I mean, the picture speaks for itself. Right? Everybody needs something different to get to the same place. So equity is never the goal, never ever. And I always say that to my audiences because sometimes folks think it is, like they'll think social emotional learning is the goal. Equity is the goal. All these other programs are the goal. No, they're not the goal. They're the vehicle, right? The goal is equality. The goal is achievement, right? The goal is opportunity. So here, the reality when you got a teacher who's got an equity mindset versus an equality mindset. Right? Because here, let me just show you real quick what the equality mindset looks like. That's what that looks like. When that teacher goes into that classroom and sees everybody as being the same, I love my students. I treat them all the same. What I give one, I give the other. I don't look at race. I don't look at ethnicity. I just see students. I don't know why we're having that conversation about race. I don't look at race. I just look at my students. I just look at my babies. Well, that's the result every time. That's the result of the teacher that sees them the same. Then the student whose learning is consistent with the modality that the teacher uses, that student reaches the apple. But everybody else, they can't eat the apple. So therefore, they can't live. Therefore, they can't survive. And that happens in so many classrooms in our world. So here, going back to equity, the reality is student individuality and identity, distinctiveness and accentuation. Those students, we know they're there. And we make sure that we strive to meet the needs of every student. Every student in that classroom is somebody, right? And that's including along racial, ethnic, cultural lines. We don't mold that into, blend them together and pretend that it doesn't exist, because when they go outside into the real world, they're going to be reminded that it does in fact exist, right? Number two, culturally responsive relations with students. So culturally, students may be different from the teacher. So what? As teacher, our role is to get to know our students and make those connections with them. Not to change them to be like us, but for us to appreciate differences in that classroom. So much more to be said about that. I'm looking at my minute hand and I'm just kind of racing. Number three, culturally relevant pedagogy, allowing the youngster to see him or herself in the lesson as opposed to holes in that lesson. Where's me in the lesson, teacher? What's this got to do with me at the end of the day? How do I use this? How do I embrace this? How do I own this? Number four, teachers' willingness to embrace possible biases, whether they be unconscious, implicit, and or explicit. That teacher said, I'm willing to embrace. I don't want biases in my class. I don't want microaggressions in my class. I want to be an open book. I want to make sure that I'm seeing this youngster through the right lens, right? I don't want to bring any bias, particularly unconsciously, and I'm not aware of it. That's that equity mindset teacher. That equality mindset teacher, you can't avoid biases because you've lumped them together. So the biases are bouncing around the walls and the hall, the ceiling and the floor like a basketball that's just relentlessly bouncing around. You couldn't get that. You couldn't remove bias if you wanted to, because you have suppressed their individuality and their identity through the excuse of being an equality mindset teacher. And then finally, in that classroom with that reality, there's a strong potential for high academic performance of all students and just an overall healthy classroom learning environment, a climate and culture that are conducive to high academic performance. So I'm at the end. I didn't even have to escape that. I'm at the end, and I just want to leave you my contact information, and you see it there, and you'll see my YouTube channels, and you see the books that the most recent books that I've written. They're all on the screen. And then those of you that want to talk leadership or dive deeper with me into leadership, then join me on Saturday mornings at my virtual Assistant Principal Leadership Academy, which it says assistant principal, but it's for anybody in leadership, including the teacher who's a leader in the room. Every Saturday morning at 11 Eastern time. Just go to my Facebook page and refresh at 11, or my Twitter page and refresh at 11, or go to my School Leadership Thoughts channel on YouTube and refresh at 11 on Saturday morning, and I'll be there waiting for you. We go 30 minutes until next May. So 35 consecutive weeks after doing 18 over the summer. So we're doing 53 weeks altogether. So with that said, I'm going to turn this back over to either Superintendent Cron or Miss Lizzie. And
Principal Cavalli, thank you so much. You've left us with a very thoughtful perspective to start the year and some things we need to work on, and we shall.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
All right. Take care, folks.
Bye-bye.